Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad Podcast with your fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nuggets to help you on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Hello, welcome to I Am Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell. Thank you for joining us for another explosive, provocative episode of I Am Dad Podcast. Thank you. I always gotta make sure that I thank all of our followers each and every Sunday, and that's when the new episode drops. And you know, you guys have been listening because I've been saying every week, subscribe. It helps our algorithms. And so, you know, if you're going to take the time to listen to the podcast, there's a little red button there and it says subscribe. So in the however long you're listening to it, just hit that red button for me. It really, really helps. And I appreciate you guys because you are listening. And we're continuing to grow. We're number 5 now in fatherhood podcasts around the world. The count is, I think, somewhere around 675 fatherhood related podcasts. Got a little bit to go before we can move up on the masculinity, manhood podcast. It's about 6,000 of them. And so we're going to get there. The content is good. Our guest is good. Our numbers are good. I'm happy, and we'll continue to progress. Again, we're in our 4th season. We're going to continue to do this thing. We're never short of content and conversation as it relates to both men, fathers, and more specifically, Black fathers. And so let's do this thing today. Our guest today, and we are honored to welcome Justin Grant. He's a communications expert, journalist, and thought leader in corporate America. As the executive director of J.P. Morgan Chase Advancing Black Pathways, Justin is dedicated to strengthening the economic foundations of Black communities worldwide. With an impressive career spanning ABC News, Thomson Reuters, Fidelity Investments, Goldman Sachs, and J.P. Morgan Chase, he has mastered the art of storytelling, public relations, and corporate messaging. Beyond his corporate leadership, Justin is the author of the new book, Company Men, a wellness guide for Black men in corporate America, a groundbreaking book that delves into the hidden health crisis facing Black men in corporate spaces. Through personal stories, research, and hard-hitting questions, Justin explores how stress, systemic challenges, and workforce culture impacts Black men's physical, mental, and emotional well-being, and what can be done to combat these effects. As a husband and father of 3, Justin brings a deeply personal perspective to our conversation on balancing success, wellness, and fatherhood. Today, we'll discuss his journey, his insights on Black fatherhood in corporate America, and how we can create a healthier, more sustainable life for ourselves and for our families. Justin, my man, how you doing?
Oh, I'm great, man. Thank you for having me today.
No, thank you for being here. I really appreciate this. Your book came past. Typically, when things come out like this, I have a ton of people that's, yo, you got to check this book out. You got to check this book out. You got to have this brother on the podcast. And it happened like 3 or 4 times.
Wow.
And I was like, look this brother up, see who this is. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, yeah, let me hit him up and see if I could get him on. So I really, really appreciate you. I love when I reach out in a cold call way to someone that I know that is extremely busy, and they tend to respond quickly back. I think it's one of the blessings we have on the podcast that it happens that way. So thank you for being a continued blessing, and all the blessing and good luck to you in this book. I know it's going to deeply impact and help people, particularly Black men who are in the middle of corporate America. And so we start our show very uniquely. And we know that everyone has a daddy story. Tell us your daddy story.
With me as the father or me as the son?
It's your daddy story. You in the barbershop. Y'all talking about dads. What's your daddy story?
All right. My daddy story is, so I have a family of 3 kids. So we're a family of 5, myself, my wife, my 3 kids. I have 2 daughters and my middle child is a son. And I always wanted to have a son. And I remember when my wife was pregnant with him, having daughters is the best, right? But I had this desire to bond with another younger male and pass on wisdom, take a younger dude to the barbershop and do father-son type things. I had this real desire in my heart. And I remember once I was in the kitchen, I said a little prayer. I said, Lord, I'll be very happy if you, bless me with some gender balance in the house and get me another dude up in here. And when my wife, we went to get the sonograms and get her examined during her pregnancy when she was carrying him, I didn't want to know the gender. And, I wanted to keep the dream alive because you don't know how many kids you're going to be blessed to have. And so I wanted to keep the dream alive. So I didn't want to know until the baby was born, what the gender was going to be. And I'll never forget, on his birthday, I'm in the delivery room and my wife is pushing and I'm standing right, I'm next to the guy who's going to deliver the baby. And I'm saying, it's like instinctively like, come on, boy, come on, boy. I'm saying, come on, boy, And then they pull the baby out and then I see his little Johnson. And I said, it's a boy. And I started jumping around. You remember when Michael Jordan hit that shot against Cleveland back in early
pump fist.
and he's jumping around. So I'm jumping around that delivery room. I'm making so much noise. And I was so happy when I saw that I had a son that the first thing I did was I called my father from the delivery room. I was like, Dad, she gave us a boy. And then I almost fainted from the excitement. I was so happy. So that's my daddy's story. Now, I appreciate having my girls because they take care of their father, and the father-daughter bond is something special. And I wish every man could experience that. But that was my father's story. That was one of the happiest moments of my life when my little boy was born.
Man, that's incredible. We share a similar story. Not only is Justin from New York, we are both Knicks fans. That's another podcast. We'll come back and talk about that later, right? But I too have 5 children. My first 4 were girls. And so I was that dude, because I got a question for you. I was that guy who was never like, do you want a boy? Like that was something that never came out of my mouth. It's like, nah, if God blesses me with one, then I'm going to be happy, but it's not something that I'm going to agonize over if it never happens. And when KJ was born, I had the same reaction. But then after it happened, I settled into another space. I want to ask you if you thought about this. And I wrote probably a 7-page, it was a journal entry. It's about 7 pages. And what the journal, I eventually ended up putting it in my autobiography at the end. It was right when I was writing this book. And Justin, what came over me was, I'm bringing another Black man into the world. And I don't know if I can save him from everything that he is going to encounter. And I had this level of anxiety about I was in New York at the time, about raising this boy. I did well with the girls, but we parent girls a little different, right? Because we always think about being their protective factor and their nurturing factor. But for boys, it's kind of like you want to raise them to fend for themselves, to protect their moms, their sisters, and other women, and to grow up in the world and not be impacted by the things that happen to them just as a matter of them being Black boys. Did you have any of that anxiety when you found out you had a son, or at some point after or since?
It's interesting. With my son, I haven't had that moment yet, but I understand everything that you're saying because I went through that with my oldest daughter. When you see them develop a race consciousness and all that comes with that, because, it generally, by and large, connotes something negative in our society when people become conscious of race. And that's a tragedy. The thing that I've noticed with my son, though, is that, where he's growing up, it's a very diverse area. And he has best buds of all these different racial backgrounds. And I'm watching him, operate. And, I have little white kids in my house, and I'm, feeding them, and I have little black kids, and I have little Asian kids and little Latino kids. I mean, it's a very diverse area, and it fills me with a level of hope. I know that there's this dark cloud that surrounds all of this, right? And we're going to get into how this society, it affects Black men, and I believe, it can wear us down in a certain type of way when you're going through microaggressions and things like that. I talk about how facing racial discrimination actually can lead to a shorter lifespan for people of color who experience these types of things. It's called the weathering effect. Chapter 1 in the book gets into that. So I'm filled with hope and seeing this boy maneuver. The thing that I'm guarding against, though, is something that you just alluded to, and I'm girding myself for it, is that, when will he have an experience that will let him know your Blackness has consigned you to a certain type of experience in this country? My prayer, my hope, my fervent desire and wish is that my son and all Black boys that are growing up now can go through life in this country as clear-eyed and with a sense of privilege to be who they are, and optimistic in a way no different than their white friends that they're going to school with. And I know how naive that sounds, but I'm trying to, just pass on hope to this boy. The unfortunate thing, though, is that, do I have to have a different conversation with my son about how he has to interact with police than maybe my white colleagues need to have with their sons? The answer to that question is unequivocally yes. There's certain nuances to life as a Black man in this country that I'm going to have to make sure that my boy is aware of. There's downsides. So I still want him to maintain that optimistic view, because optimism and hope, that's what's going to move us forward. But we do have to have a level of mindfulness around, there's some shadows that we got to deal with. There's some things in this country that have not been rectified and probably never will. There's certain rules of engagement that you have to be aware of when you are a Black man. And, I'm going to bring him along. He travels the world with me. I take him to museums. I try to expose him to stuff and let him know. But there's going to come a point where he understands. He's only 9, and I'm awaiting that moment when that race consciousness starts to develop. Now, my daughter, my oldest, she asked me. We're in South Orange, New Jersey, and we're not far from Newark. And one day I was driving past this apartment complex in Ivy Hill, and she said to me, "Dad, why is it that all the people that live in that apartment building, that complex, why is it that all the brown people live like that, whereas white people live in the nicer houses up the hill?" Right? And she was probably in I want to say the first or second grade when she asked me that question. So, there is this. They can feel certain things,
This is a different generation, though. I think they absorb and see this differently. My son, too, he's 16 now. And so he's in a private school here in Atlanta. We the George Jeffersons, we moved on up, came out of New York, came down here, established, my not-for-profit, came out of corporate America and went into not-for-profit work. And I've been in it for now 30 years. But ever since the first day I stepped into this space, I never saw my company as a not-for-profit. I saw it as a profit. I saw it as a for-profit business doing good. And that's how I've operated it, since then. And all of my children, including my son, who is, he wants to go to the league, basketball player, AAU, he can curate his own destiny. Right. And he's around, to your point, when I go to the school, his friends are extremely diverse, extremely affluent, very connected. And the entire campus is like that. And so not once in the 6 years that he's been going there have I heard anything racially disturbing, right? I'm sure little small things, but nothing that has raised to the
Right.
level of radar that says that it is an issue. And what that means to me is that you can all, under common ground, live and congregate and socialize in the same space and judge and treat each other based on the friendships that exist and the respect of the same people who are in a similar environment to you. When you began to start thinking about corporate America and moving along that trajectory into your career, what inspired you to go that way? Because oftentimes, for those of us who grew up in New York, I could tell you how my family looked at, forward progression. And that was graduate from high school, get a city job, work for 40 years, get a pension, and, and move to Queens. That's what the upward mobility looked like in New York for us. How did you navigate, and what was your inspiration for moving along the corporate ladder?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's all about the examples that are in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I have my uncle, my mother's brother, who was a senior executive at Johnson and Johnson. He was the CFO for Ethicon Endosurgery Inc., which is one of J&J's pharmaceutical instruments companies. And then I had my mom, who, she was an executive assistant at places like Goldman Sachs, Brown Brothers Harriman. I went to a high school that specialized in steering kids into careers in economics and finance. So for me, it was all about the examples that I had in front of me. And, I had a clear view into the reality that I don't need to necessarily have a jump shot. I don't need to be able to rap. I don't need to do the street thing. I can make some serious money and live a good life. My uncle, he had the nice house out in West Windsor, New Jersey. That's the Princeton Junction stop on the New Jersey Transit, right? Super high
Mm-hmm.
tax base in that area. We would congregate there for Thanksgiving, for holidays. He'd have cookouts. I mean, he was that dude. Nice car, pretty wife, cute kids. My uncle really was. It's all about the art of the possible and having examples in front of you, and he was that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I kind of you know saw myself building a life. I wanted to be just like my uncle.
Yeah, and that's cool. I mean, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. Just continue to live a modeled life that can serve as an example. And all of my kids have entrepreneurial spirits, which was as a result of me getting out of that comfort zone of Brooklyn, New York, and moving and
Yeah,
coming to Atlanta and being exposed, right? And not only being exposed, but being inspired, right? Because you come here and we everywhere. We doing everything. It's not, to your point, in Brooklyn it was either the drug dealers, the hoopers, or the rappers, and you're kind of looking at the three of them, and you're trying to make a choice, or the pastor, and you're looking at those four things. Which of one of those tracks am I going to take? And then you get to Atlanta, and it's kind of like, wait a minute. A friend of mine, tell you the short story, Justin, when before I came to Atlanta, a friend of mine moved from New York to Atlanta, and he had gotten down here, and he called, and I was like, yo, what's up, man? I was like, tell me about it. What's going on with Atlanta? He said, bruh, he said, I was sitting here, I turned on the TV, and I'm watching the news. And he said, I saw the craziest thing, and it hit me like where I was. He says it was a fire. And he says, and I'm sitting there looking at the news reporter, and she was black. And he said the anchors was black. And he says the paramedics that was on scene was black, and the firemen was black, and the crowd around them was black, and the people in the burning up in the building was black. He said everything was black. And he's like, wow, like this is
yeah,
different. And that's what Atlanta has been. It has been different to be immersed in your culture, but even being immersed in your culture, understanding how that immersion radiates to the broader public that
yeah.
we have to deal with and our children have to deal with. So you write this book, man, company man, make sure y'all pick this up. We're going to be talking about this. It's going to be on the website. I'm probably going to bring some more guests. Might have to bring you back to dig into this a little more because it's something I've been thinking about at my seasoned age, right? Particularly about health. What propelled you to sit down and say, you know what, I need to write this book? Like, what was it that made you like say, I'm going to write this book because I think it's something that people need to read?
Yeah, I love that question as well. So, I've been in corporate America now for 19 years, including my time as an intern. And I'm a journalist. That's my background. I'm not doing that on a day-to-day basis right now, but I see things in patterns. I see stories. And, one of the things that I noticed, first off, my uncle passed away at the age of 48 from a heart
Mm.
attack. He was fit, he was healthy, handsome, passed away during the Christmas holidays in '02 on the basketball court at the company gym. And that traumatic event in my life sent me on a bit of a quest to try and understand, why did this happen? And look, I understand that, genetics might have played a role in us losing him so early. But I also know that your genes are not necessarily your destiny, and that your
Mhm.
environment can activate, certain things from a genetic standpoint. So I really wanted to understand, what was it beyond that contributed, to my uncle's death. And then 4 years after he passed, I start my corporate career as a journalist at Thomson Reuters. Really good job right out of college, covering financial markets. And I remember when I got the job, the person who ran that newsroom, the editor in charge for the Americas, he said to me straight up, he said, "Look, there's a lot of skepticism about you. We're going to give you a shot, over a probationary period. You got 3 months to sink or swim." And
Mhm.
that was not really motivating for me. For me, it actually frightened me. And I remember stepping into that place. You already feel like an imposter for being there in the first place, right? I'm a year or two removed from running the streets with my friends, in Brooklyn, and now I'm in this, uber corporate setting, and I come into that job and I'm looking over my shoulder now. Wow, these people are
Mhm.
skeptical of me. I never felt like I belonged because of that. That was my formative experience, and it led to me developing a level of anxiety because, for those of us who are trying to make it that don't come from wealth, it's like, if this fails, then what next? What happens? Will I ever
Right.
find another job? Will I be stuck living in my mom's apartment, for the rest of my life? And it sent me into a spiral of anxiety, and wound up developing acid reflux. And I don't think I did my best work, because you need a level of psychological safety, particularly when you're in a creative type profession, to do your best work. You got to feel safe in your surroundings, and I never did while I was there. And so I'm like, man, and so I leave there after a few years. I find my footing, but then I start talking to brothers that work in corporate. I start hearing about their experiences. I start seeing brothers that are going through massive stress related health situations that are directly tied to their jobs. I work at a major financial institution right now, and I just lost a colleague in January, 45 years old, managing director, heart, right? He was a guy that we all respected, all looked up to, but 45 years old, left behind a wife, two daughters, devastated community. He was making good money, but he probably wasn't even at his peak. He was probably going to hit another level, right? This is a guy that was on track to be a CEO potentially. Then there's another brother, industry colleague, gets a major job as the CIO of a major global financial institution, suffers a massive stroke at the age of 47, 48. And
Mm.
debilitating. He survived, but he's dealing with the physical therapy and all the downward effects of going through that type of an event. I have another friend who lives near us in the Oranges, works for an NBA team in the area. I won't say which one, just out of respect for privacy, but like not even 40 years old, fit, healthy, suffers a stroke. He's had multiple surgeries in the past month to stop bleeding in his brain. So I'm putting all this
Mm.
together. I'm like, my experience I'm seeing these things happen. I'm interviewing brothers for the book. I saw it happen with my uncle. I interviewed a brother who was running a major marketing campaign for Budweiser. He was part of the team that developed that campaign around Dylan Mulvaney, the transgender influencer.
Mm-hmm.
And Kid Rock leads a major protest against Budweiser. My friend is caught in the middle of that. And the stress from being in that environment affected his health to the point where he goes to the doctor. Mind you, this is a guy, he's fit, right? He's going to the gym. We go to the gym, right?
Mm-hmm.
Goes to the gym. He works out, takes care of himself, but then he goes to the doctor to get his checkup. The doctor says to him, you can't live with your blood pressure this high. You
Wow.
can't. He gets fired from the job. They clean house because of the fallout from that. It cost him $1 billion in sales. He leaves amidst the fallout. And then his blood pressure goes back to normal after a couple of weeks of not being in that environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've heard that story. I talk about that story in chapter 1 multiple times over. So clearly, the stressors of corporate life, and let's keep it 100 here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stress of working in corporate America is universal to everybody who works in corporate America. I don't care if you're white, black, gay, straight, male, female, whatever. There's certain things that you deal with. The uncertainty, right? Mass layoffs, reorgs. These are realities. You live with the level of uncertainty. Office politics, coworkers that you can't stand, micromanaging bosses, the person who brings stinky fish and heats it up in the microwave, right? There's all sorts of stressors that are universal. But the thing that I'm trying to have Black men understand is that these stressors might be affecting our bodies a little bit differently than our peers. We've got the second lowest life expectancy of any demographic in this country. The other thing that I've learned is that the higher we climb the socioeconomic ladder, the greater the likelihood that we will eventually develop anxiety and depression. That is a trend line that's not seen in any other group. And when you develop anxiety and depression, it leads to all sorts of downstream effects on your health. It'll affect your sleep. If you don't sleep right, it will affect your blood sugar. Your blood sugar ain't right, it'll affect your cardiovascular system. Once you have problems there, that's hypertension. Hypertension paves the way for heart events, for strokes. You can't work out properly. So I'm trying to, use this book as a call to action to get Black men to recognize how to deal with corporate life in a way that won't affect your body and that will also benefit you over the long run. I also address other dimensions of wellness. I get into the financial. I have a whole chapter on financial wellness and negotiating salary, turning your wages into wealth. Psychological wellness. How do you process anger in the right way in corporate America? Social wellness. How do you network and build those types of relationships, and then build that roadmap for your career? But if you are not on top of your health, then none of it matters. And we don't go to the doctor. And there's historical reasons why we don't trust doctors, but that's another thing. Like, brother, we got to collect the data on what's happening with our health, because if we don't deal with that, that's why that's chapter 1. If we're not taking care of this, nothing else matters.
Yeah, it's interesting because we just lost. I lost a brother of mine who worked for us day after Christmas, morning after Christmas. Fell over in a chair, talking to his wife after she had just made him breakfast. 47 years old. And Lawrence and I was talking. We were that close. We talked. Still, like, my mind is like, this cannot have happened. Like, his voice is as clear in my head as yours is in my head right now. That's every day. His voice is in my head like that. And we had these conversations because we always had these conversations, because I'm 63 now. I just finished writing a book. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with this thing. It's called Too Seasoned to Care. The true liberation of aging, and how as you get older, your life has more clarity and you begin to start seeing what's important in life, right? And the things that don't matter as much anymore, and they don't guide you anymore. And so our tongue tends to be looser, our action, we take more risk. But the one thing that also happens is we get in this comfort level of not paying attention to our health.
Mm.
And so in my book, I write about, about 2 years ago, Justin, I started this quest, Braswell, get your life right. That's what this quest was. And that the number one for getting my life right was my health. And so I made appointments with my doctor and the dentist and my sleep apnea and all this stuff to you need to get this stuff together. Gym membership, all these things I started. But when I was going to the doctors, it's different than when you were young, that when you went to the doctor, you expected to get a clean bill of health. That's what you went for the doctor to say, you're good.
Yeah,
right?
you're good. Yep.
You good. And you walk out happy and you go back to whatever life you was living, eating pork, drinking candy bars, drinking sodas, not working out, all those kinds of things that you did because you good. Your body can handle it. Then all of a sudden you start going to the doctor and the doctor starts saying, I don't like your A1C level. You're like pre-diabetes and you got to take these pills. And I don't like your blood pressure. That's really high. You got to take this. You got to bring your blood pressure down. I don't like the way you got a pre-hernia and I don't like the way the lump is in. And you start and you walk out of the doctor's office and you're like,
man,
right? But then you got to come home and you got to sit there and you got to so what am I going to do now? But there's this other voice in the back of your head that's like, brother, why did you neglect your body for so long? Because you didn't have to be here. You could have done the things in little small amounts of time that could have changed your health trajectory as you get older. But now I'm listening to you talking about brothers who were fit, who did everything that I'm now agonizing over I didn't do, and we're losing them too. What is the factor? Because it seems like you're damned if you do, you damned if you don't. And those of us who are sitting on the outside looking at this are trying to figure out what exactly should I be doing to ensure that I'm healthy and that I'm here for the legacy of my children.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that we have to understand is that we're not getting out of here alive, right? Like this body is gonna it's gonna wear it down at a certain point because it's not made to be here forever. It's just not. I think scientists are working on all kinds of crazy stuff, but as it stands now, we're not designed to live forever. However, with all that being said, I hear your story and I'm like, man, you're doing all the right things because you've nipped things in the bud. Even if you're over 60, you've done a very important thing in that you've gathered data about what's going on with your health because everything that you just described is reversible. A1C, all of that stuff is reversible with the right dietary and lifestyle changes. Cholesterol is reversible. I think when you go to the doctor and you get the data and you hear those things, you could be my age and hear that type of news. And, you'll still be healthy, but the reality is your body is almost like a car with every check engine light flashing yellow. Like,
Right.
let's address this stuff now so that it doesn't lead to a full breakdown. Now, in terms of Black men who have gone through things at younger ages, my concern is that many of us are waiting too long to go to the doctor. Many of us are waiting until we're at death's door before we get ourselves looked at. And, there are reasons for this. Majority of us don't go to the doctor, but many of us have reported on having negative experiences with doctors when we go. Many of us find it scary. The reality is every time we go to get checked out, we are confronting our mortality, right?
Hmm.
We are
Yeah.
being confronted with data that I don't like going to the doctor, and I'll keep it 100 with you. The only reason why I even go is because my wife was nagging me. I'll never forget
Mm.
back in the pandemic, she was sweating me about going to the doctor because my doctor retired, early during COVID. And
Mhm.
I'm like, all right, babe, yeah, whatever. Jay, did you make your appointment? Yeah, I'm gonna take care of it next week. Next week. Leave me alone with that crap. I'm not trying. Listen, I'm running 15 miles a week, crushing the hills of New Jersey.
Mhm.
I'm biking with my friends all over the place. Like, babe, leave me alone with that, right? So
Mhm.
one day I'm sitting at the table reading my New York Times. I'm sipping my coffee. I'm at my laptop. She hands me the phone. Hi, this is Heather from Summit Medical Group. Would you like to make your appointment? So yeah, whatever. I make the appointment, and then so I'm 40. I'm 44 years old. At the
Okay.
time, I think I was 40 or 41. But anyway, make the appointment. It gets real when you go to the doctor and you're over 40 years old, right? At your
Mm.
point, they
Mhm.
start looking at things a little bit differently. You don't just get they're always going to tell you something when you leave. 100% of the time, you're never going to be. There's nothing. There's always some crap that the doctor's going to tell you. So anyway, they take the vials of blood, and I'm like, I was stunned at how much blood they took. They took one vial, two. I mean, I'm like, good Lord, and I can't even look when they're doing it. I'm such a punk when it comes to blood, right? But anyway, they take all the blood, and I'm all right. Good, I got that all done. They take the urine sample. So then I go about my business, and one day I'm in the drive-through line at Dunkin' Donuts, right over by Turtleback Zoo here in my area. And
Mm.
I'm in the drive-through line waiting on my turkey sausage, egg, and cheese biscuit with the coffee. And
Mm.
I start getting these push notifications. And your this is too high. And your that is too high. And I'm like,
Right.
good Lord, what's going on here? It was like bang, bang. And I
Right.
go to the doctor and he said, look, you're a healthy dude, but you're like a car with every check engine light on. We've got to address some of this stuff. And
Right.
he helped me to identify certain genetic risk factors for cardiovascular events. He helped me to create a plan for my lifestyle. Because of my makeup, I have to really eat a plant-based diet. I eat a little bit of fish. You know, um, I didn't give up red meat and pork and all that stuff because I wanted to. He helped me to understand my makeup. He helped me to understand my genetics. And this is the other thing that I appreciate about my doctor is that he didn't go reaching for prescription medications. He prescribed things for me to read.
Mm.
He prescribed movies for me to watch. Forks Over Knives is
Mm.
a good one. The Game Changers on Netflix is a good one. Gets into the whole plant-based thing. And some people can eat meat and they're fine, right? Like, but for
Right.
me, I can't. And
Right.
it helped me to reverse some of these numbers. And so I go every year. And sometimes, they might want you to go see a specialist for follow-up. And this is the thing that I want Black men to understand. Let them go the extra mile for you. If there's something that
Mhm.
looks a little quirky in a test result and they say, we want you to go see that specialist, go to that specialist. Because there was a time when, they would under test us, right? Yeah, they would assume that you're fine. So I would say let them go the extra mile, gather all of that data, and take action on that data because it will extend your life. And I can't speak to the specifics around the cases that I just mentioned.
Mhm.
My colleague who died at the age of 45, or the brother who had the stroke. But what I can say is that one of my friends that suffered that stroke, a lot of us saw, that job is running him into the ground,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
we got to be in tune with, how are we feeling here also?
Mhm.
Is it job,
Mhm.
is it a healthy environment for me to be in?
Right.
Am I sacrificing my life just for money? Money, you can find other ways of making money. right? If a job
Right.
is not right for this, for your mental, get the hell
Hmm.
out. If it's not,
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because that's where this conversation is going today, or at least is broadening for us as Black men, which is your mental health capacity is just as, if not more important than your physical health
yeah,
capacity. And the folks that you interviewed and talked to in your book, how much of that are you seeing with Black men in corporate America that they're not taking notice to their mental capacity?
well, one of the things that I've seen in my reporting for the book, in the research that I've done, is that we as Black men have been compelled by societal forces to adopt this sort of cool pose, right?
Mm,
We're unbothered. We don't we're not allowed to express any negative emotions, right? Could you imagine being a Black man and showing anger in a corporate office? Do you think you're
mm,
allowed to do that? Right? There
yeah.
are rules. There are unwritten rules that govern who is allowed to flex anger. That's the ultimate flex when you're in corporate America, when you could be that person that could drop an F bomb in a meeting or get mad,
Mm,
right? If
mm,
you're a Black person, if you're a Black male, even if you're the CEO, do you think you're allowed to do that? Was President Obama allowed to ever not be cool? I remember one
right.
time Janet Brewer, former governor of Arizona, was wagging her finger in his face. It's the president of the United States. He had to just take it, right?
Mm,
You're not allowed to flex in that way. We're forced to adopt a cool pose. And I talk about this, there's different variations of it. You remember the tennis pro Arthur Ashe?
absolutely.
So Arthur Ashe, him and his contemporaries. So he talked about his contemporaries. They were part of that first generation of people that made their entryway into corporate America.
Hmm.
Talk about this in a book. Where Arthur, he was playing tennis and he was, doing commentaries for the New York Times, a real intellectual guy, but he had friends that worked in corporate offices. And one of the things that he noted was that, and this was in the mid 80s, like 86, 87. I cite a column that he wrote for the Times in that period. And he talked about how many of his friends were hypertense. Many of them
Mm,
had heart attacks. And this is in that age range between like 38 and 45.
hmm.
Many of them had been through divorces. And they were all miserable because of what it was that they were dealing with at work. And Arthur Ashe himself was forced to adopt the cool pose as a young boy playing tennis growing up in pre-civil rights era Virginia, right? He had to
Hmm.
go into country clubs and be gawked at, and people would shout epithets at him, but he was
Right.
trained, and he was trained. You got to keep cool even in spite of all that, and he believed that it led to his heart problems. And so hearing him talk to us across generations, and then I juxtapose that with my own experience. I'm from the hip hop generation, and we were forced to adopt a different version of the cool pose, but a cool pose nonetheless.
Hmm.
Repression of all negative emotion. You're not allowed to get mad. We're not allowed to be sad. We're not allowed to be, we can't cry, right? We have to be these hyper masculine type dudes. And one of the things that I address in the book around mental health, it's in chapter 2, is we have to find healthy release valves for
Mm,
negative emotions. And I'm a big proponent of therapy. I don't use therapy on a permanent basis, but I do believe in the power of therapy as a go-to tool. We have to make sure that we're maintaining this. There are different layers to our experience as human beings. There's this
hmm.
physical layer. I am a body. You are a body. But then there's this mental layer as well. And then some would believe there's a spiritual layer as the third layer. And each of those layers requires a certain level of care to make sure that
Hmm.
we're operating at optimal health.
Mm. Yeah, when you were talking about Arthur Ashe and you was juxtaposing, I thought you was going to juxtapose him to John McEnroe
Yeah, he
because
talked
remember how?
about that. He said
Yeah,
he wishes he had the emotional freedom to be a bad boy like McEnroe and Jimmy Connors. He said that.
right.
He said,
Mm-hmm.
if I had behaved like that, the world of tennis would have driven me out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Which
Yeah.
is, man, when you know, what I've been trying to determine, Justin, as we get to the end, but I want you to talk about this a little bit because I think it's important. And one of the things that I've tried to do in my organization is to always, for the fathers that we're serving, connect them to the main thing, right? And for me, the main thing is their children. But their children are also a motivating factor. So for men who are just not taking their health seriously, whether it's their physical health or their mental health, what's the switch that has to come on for them to motivate them? And when will that typically occur for Black men? Like when it can't happen for most of us. I always joke about this. We don't care about our health unless it's broken or it don't work, right? One or the other. That's what brings us to the doctor. It's broken or it don't work. But the switch has to come on before then, right? And so for the brother who is going to work and don't even know his job is killing him, on top of all this other stuff that's going on right now, right? Because all of it, in my estimation, is microaggressors. They are all they coming in from all over the place, and we don't realize how many areas of our lives, particularly as Black people, but more specifically to this conversation as Black men, how our psyche is being attacked.
Yeah.
And how that is, we're going to bed with all kinds of things on our minds, and we're waking up in the morning and we're walking out into the world with all kinds of things that we have to be concerned with from the point that we walk out of the door to the point that we desire to walk back in the door. But for those dads who the switch hasn't come on for, what is your advice? What do you say to him?
Well, I can only speak from personal experience in that regard. And, for me, it boils down to a few things. If I'm able to be alive, do I want some other guy to be married to my wife at some point? God might take me, whatever, but if there's anything in my power to stop that, right? I want to be around for my wife. Do I want my kids to be in this world before they are adults without me there to guide them?
Right.
Do I want that for my kids? I personally don't want that. I want to be able to, I want to be able to see them have kids of their own and get married and start their lives. I'd like to see some grandkids. Selfishly,
Right.
there's so much wonder and joy in that. So for me, it's a selfish desire. I want to continue to be in their lives in the physical as long as possible. So that's what drives me. And on their behalf, I'm willing to face my mortality, going
Mm-hmm.
to the doctor and understanding the things that could kill this body if I am not making the right adjustments. So that's how I think about it, brother.
Yeah, no, I think children are the hook. It's the motivating factor. But I think a lot of men they have to be pointed towards that. Not only their children, but their wives, spouses, girlfriends, or whatever, partnership relationship that they're in. You got to start looking at your loved ones, right? Because that is the thing that has crystallized for me since Lawrence's passed, in December.
How
And
did he die,
I'm
man?
watching.
Was it hard? Was it his heart?
It was it was his heart, which he had been struggling with a little bit, but they weren't able to determine whether or not it was all his heart and some level of why am I forgetting that word? It
Aneurysm?
starts with yes, in his head. So it was, but him and I know he was on blood pressure medicines just like we were on the same thing because we always talked about it, right? But what's crystallizing in front of me right now is watching his wife and his children in the grieving process,
Yeah,
because him
man.
and his wife got married really early, young, and were married for 25 years.
Man.
Adopted his son and his daughter from their dad who had substance abuse issues, and they didn't have children of their own, but these two, Taya and Deshaun, was their, I mean, they was their children. And so what I'm watching is her grieve, and I'm thinking about what you just said, which is they are now transitioning into young adulthood, and this support mechanism, which was their father, who they relied on to be there for the rest of their lives, are no longer there. And for dads, my thing is, to your point, which was absolutely perfect, you do not want to not be available for your children when they need you the most. And it most certainly can't be because of a choice you made.
Yeah. And look, certain things we have no control over. One of my friends, his son's soccer coach passed away of a rare form of cancer. It took him rapidly. He was 41. There's certain things we can't control. But if there's something in your power that can help you to live longer and to maximize your health span and your longevity and your happiness, right? Don't spend
Mm-hmm.
1 minute in a job that does not serve you. That is a special kind of hell when you are stuck doing a job that you don't like. And
Mm-hmm.
we have a precious existence. We are here at this point in time in the eternal vacuum of space, my brother. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful moment. Don't waste that moment doing work that is tearing away at who you are. I personally believe, I'm an optimist, and I believe this is the best time. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care about the political dialogue and the rhetoric and the noise. I think this is the best time to be alive if you are black
Mm-hmm.
in this country. We
Mm-hmm.
have more black people have jobs now than ever before. Black wages is higher than it's ever been. Um, we have more black people running Fortune 500 companies than ever before. There's still gaps. There's still
Mm-hmm.
we have to correct, but you can't tell me, nobody can tell me that we haven't made significant progress over the past 50 years. And so I think it's a matter of us having the right perspective and understanding
Mm-hmm.
that if you're in a corporate environment that is toxic and it's not good for you, get out. If you're on a path that is not leading to you feeling fulfilled and the contribution that you make to the world every day, get out. Find something that motivates you and that gets you excited and that helps you unlock your genius, right? I think we
Mm-hmm.
have to take power into our own hands. And even in this moment, with all the rhetoric around DEI and all this stuff, let's just look inwardly. What can we be doing to build ourselves up? Let's leave all that stuff, all that noise over
Mm-hmm.
there, and let's look
Mm-hmm.
at ourselves and build ourselves up.
Yeah, we're in the same space, bro. I'm like, listen, this is an opportunity to focus on ourselves,
Yeah,
right? Like, maybe in a very strange way, that's why this is happening,
it might be a blessing for all we know.
right? Like, focus on you, focus on the opportunities before you, because this reality is going to be the reality of our children, and they need to understand now how to navigate that space, which is why I love the fact that all of my children have entrepreneurial spirits. My son, and my youngest daughter, in very different ways in the last few years, have said to me they don't ever want anybody signing their checks.
Good for them. Good for them. Now I'll say this too. If they do decide to do corporate for a little while, one of the benefits of corporate is that it'll teach you certain disciplines and systematic
Mm-hmm.
ways of doing things that'll benefit you when you start your
Mm-hmm.
business. And I love the idea of everybody thinking in that respect.
Yeah. Justin, man, love everything that you're doing, loving everything about you. His book is called Company Men, a wellness guide for black men in corporate America. Tell everybody how they can get in touch with you and where they can find the book.
So the book is available at all major retailers. The audio book just came out on March 18th if you prefer to listen to your books. And you can reach me at companymen.org. So feel free to reach out.
looking kind of smooth too, man. I'm happy you don't have to give me your photo, your
I know, man. I'm
your,
looking at that. I'm like, I was fresh off Martha's Vineyard. I had the pan and everything. It was great.
like, that's a good look. Us dudes though. I'm like, man, that's a good looking dude.
Yeah,
Like, man looking dapper, like, on the front cover. That's how I'm trying to look on my cover
I
in my
can dig
book.
it.
You done gave me some inspiration. I done seen a pose. You might, when you see my book, I might be fronting that same pose on my book. Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you so much. Let's stay in touch, bro, because I think that there's some things that we can do together. I want to continue to help move your book into the spaces that I'm in and the things that I'm doing. I think it's a relevant conversation. I think people are really beginning to start to look at, particularly for Black men, look at our health. I think Black men are beginning to take it seriously. And I believe books like this and others are motivating factors to push them to that motivation point where they begin to see life in a different way, and are motivated in ways that allow us to continue to move in faith and not fear.
That's right, brother. That's right.
Right. And so to my I Am Dad podcast listeners, thank you so much for listening again. You know how I like to leave you. Always be kind to others as you're kind to yourself, or you might find yourself by yourself. Always shoot high for your goals, because even if you miss, you'll be amongst the stars. And as my good friend and mentor Art Mitchell used to always say to me, Kenny, it's nice to be important, but you know what? It's much more important to be nice. Till next Sunday, God bless. Have a great week. Peace out.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad Podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting IamDadPodcast.com. That's IamDadPodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am dad, period.